If you can't go left, you can always try right. If you can't go right, you can always try forward. But no matter what you do, we'll always create a memory because you are special.
Hello and welcome to RBV, Milestone Whisperers. I'm Dr. Rashida, your host, and today I'm going to be talking about a milestone that's very near and true to my heart because it's my milestone to becoming a physical therapist, Dr. Rashida. And the journey to get to being a physical therapist. So this is going to be a really inspiring conversation, I hope, for other people that may have had to go through challenges in order to get to the journey that they want to get to, or if they're still having challenges. It will hopefully help to inspire people. So here goes. So yeah, I always wanted to go into the medical field, even from like elementary school. I always wanted to be a doctor. Specifically, I wanted to be a pediatrician. And I remember just throughout school, that was what my parents called me, the future doctor. That's what they really believed that I would be. They really supported the fact that that's what I wanted to become. And during high school, my favorite classes were the sciences, biology, anatomy and physiology. When I first took that, when I was a senior in high school, I knew that I loved the human body and I knew that I wanted to study something related to the human body. And I still had in my mind that I was going to go to med school and that I was going to become a doctor. When I was ending my senior year in high school, my father was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and it was devastating because during the time when I was growing up, we had a family business. I worked in a family bakery. My dad was the baker, and my mom did everything else, and I worked with my mom. So watching my dad go from being an entrepreneur and healthy and vibrant and everything, and then suddenly he always suffered with like indigestion and gas, and he would take Tums like it was candy. But one day when he was working in the bakery, he passed out and went to the hospital, and they did tests and everything. And this was in the 90s. So, and I was the oldest. I was in high school though, so I didn't know the questions to ask and everything. And my mom was a young mom and a young wife. So my dad was the one that asked a lot of questions, and all he wanted was that cancer out of his body. When he was diagnosed with cancer, he immediately said that he wanted that cancer out of his body. When I was a senior and it was nearing like my junior prom and graduation and stuff, I remember him first undergoing treatments. He was getting chemotherapy and radiation, and it took such a toll on his body. He went from being just such a lively person to just, being sick and just being weak. And it was really during that time where I said, that's where I want to help people. I want to help people be motivated to be strong, despite an illness. I remember just when he wouldn't want to get out of bed, or he was just so nauseous and vomiting and things, I would encourage him to get up and move around a little bit. And that kind of, in retrospect, that kind of set the tone for me becoming a PT, even though at that time I was still going to go to school to be a medical doctor. Fast forward, my dad, his illness progressed really quickly. So he was diagnosed in like the spring of 1997, and I graduated, and I remember my picture from graduation. My dad was so thin. He was going through the chemo and the radiation. He was so thin, but he had decided that he wanted to have surgery. So he had surgery that summer. He actually had the tumor removed the day before my 18th birthday. And it was tough because when they went in and they they went to remove the tumor from his stomach, they realized that the cancer was spread throughout his body. So, wow, I didn't think that I was going to cry. So, it was pretty obvious that he wasn't going to survive ultimately. So, he stayed in the hospital for a while, so that was in August. He actually was a stubborn guy, man. My dad, he wanted to come home. So he signed himself out the hospital and took a taxi and came home. We didn't even expect him to come home. We would go to the hospital. My mom didn't drive. She relied on my dad to drive, or either he would arrange for a friend to take her to the hospital. But a lot of times she would walk up to the hospital. There was quite a distance, several times a day. I'm the oldest, so I was 18 and I had younger siblings. And so I was in college and dealing with my dad deteriorating was tough. But anyway, he came home because he wanted to be home. He came home, we had nursing care, he had a feeding tube, and he just wanted to be in the comfort of his own home. But this was around Thanksgiving time, so it was getting close to my finals. But I just remember the last time that we took a walk, we walked up and down the street, and that was just like so rewarding to me because my dad was feeling positive and we were just talking. I don't even remember the conversation, but I just remember just him getting up and moving. It was so just, it made me feel full of hope, and it made him feel good because he was moving around, after being in the hospital for several months. Fast forward to December, and he ended up taking a turn for the worse, having to go back to the hospital. And ended up passing away the week before Christmas, which ended up being like on the morning of my chemistry final. So all throughout my first semester of school, I suffered, understandably so. My grades were bad, Only class that I actually really still did good in was English. And that was interesting because I've always been a strong writer, but English, I was acing that class. And my advisor had told me that maybe I should consider changing my major from biology to some type of journalism or something. And I was like, no, I'm going into the medical field, regardless. So even though I had C's and D's, I don't think I failed a class my first semester, but my GPA was low. But I didn't stop school. I continued even throughout the burying process for my dad and just adjusting to us not having him anymore. I continued to go to school. I never took a semester off. I had to take classes over. But by the time I finished college, I ended up having to do an extra year. So it took me 5 years to get my bachelor's degree, but I got a bachelor's of science in biology. And then in my last year of undergrad, I did take the MCATs. I didn't do too well. I had a 3.0, ended up with my final GPA, which if you know about med school, that's not good enough for med school. So I had to go back and I took some classes and I tried to get my GPA up. But I started to do research about if I really wanted to be a medical doctor, physician. Did I want to go into research because I was passionate about cancer and that, but I like people and I like helping people. So I kind of took the scenic route to become a PT. once I realized that maybe medical school wasn't for me and that I wanted to help people, but I wanted to be more on the rehabilitation part, I just would remember like how gratifying it was to me when I was helping my dad, when he was able to get out of bed and when he was able to walk around. That was the hopeful part for me. And that was the part that really drove me to become a physical therapist. But I didn't go to PT school right away. I lacked some of the classes that I needed to go. So I had to go back for a year and take those necessary classes to get into PT school. But I also had to get some experience under my belt. So I volunteered at Nova Care near my school, got recommendations, and I ended up getting accepted into my alma mater for undergrad, which is Temple University. So I ended up going there for PT school as well. Now, at this point, I was not fresh out of college. Remember, I took 5 years to finish undergrad, then I had to go back for a year. So I was a little bit older compared to some of my classmates, and I had responsibilities. I was the oldest, so I helped my mom with bills as I can. Not really bills, but more so, I didn't live on campus, so more so like my bills. So I had a car, I had, expenses. I was still a regular young adult, so I wanted to go out and things like that. So I worked throughout college and throughout my first semester of PT school. And then I realized that I couldn't work during PT school because I was exhausted. And it takes a lot of studying and a lot of time outside the classroom to really excel in PT school. And plus, we have clinical work as well. So my time was all dedicated to going to school. So fast forward, finished PT school, took the boards. I did not pass the boards the first time. I was 1 point away from passing, and I had a job set up. But I had to retake the board, so I had to study, retake them, and pass the second time and had a job. And that was my job at a hospital. And I actually had a rotating position. So I worked in outpatient with adults, and I also worked in a school setting. So I always dabbed a little bit in the pediatrics. I worked in the school district outside a suburb outside of Philadelphia, and I went to different schools and worked with school age kids. And that was a little bit challenging because those kids sometimes don't want to do PT. Schools could be a little bit chaotic. So once I rotated to an inpatient position, a friend of mine from PT school we kept in touch, and he brought me on to early intervention. And he said, "This is cool." At this point, I had my first child. And I was just so, like, when I had my first son, I was so just excited about development. And I think that's what made me really go into early intervention. He was born a little bit early. He was only, I had him at 37 weeks. So he was, not considered premature, but he was, he had cooked a little bit longer. He was small. But developmentally, he was on track. He was, everything, all his lungs and everything were fine. We were able to come home right away. But I just love like the whole developmental stuff, the tummy time, and when he started rolling, and when he started crawling, and just the mobility. And I really threw myself into early intervention. Although I still love the hospital setting, I still love working in inpatient and working with multiple disciplines, physicians, nurses, social workers, case managers, all those things. So even though I'm in early intervention primarily now, I still just love helping people in general. I just go back to when my dad was sick and getting him up and moving. And during COVID, my family and I, we would have what we call family fitness, because I have like we call them the elders in my family, but like the older generation where they're not necessarily as mobile, able to get out and about. But during COVID, we were all in quarantine. So I started, along with other family members, what's called family fitness, where we would log on to Zoom or another video chat where we would log on and we were exercise. And it turned, at first it was like one person would sign up that day to lead the exercises. So it would be like a cousin or aunt or my mom or someone would lead the exercises first. But then it turned into me leading it. So I would be the one that would come up with the creative exercises and I would send out the group text and it kind of started to be my thing where like, let's work out as a family together. Let's hold each other accountable. Let's just motivate each other. And that's something that during the pandemic, when I was working remotely, that was my thing. So the name Dr. Rashida came about actually during the pandemic. So like when I worked in a hospital, I introduced myself as Rashida, the physical therapist. With the kids that I worked with, I was Miss Rashida. So Dr. Rashida came about interestingly enough when during the pandemic I would send families exercises. So I would record. My daughter was 4 at the time. She had literally just turned 4, like at the beginning of the pandemic. And so I use her as my model a lot of times. And if you look at my social media, you will see like old videos of her when she was so little, helping me do these videos. But I would email them to families. And at the end of my email, I would put my name and I would put DPT. So I had this one mom that said, "What does DPT stand for?" And I said, "It's Doctor of Physical Therapy." And she was like, "Oh my goodness. Rashida, you're a doctor." I said, "Well, I have my doctor in physical therapy." And she was like, "I'm going to start calling you Dr. Rashida." And that just stuck. So that's where Dr. Rashida was born. You know, the term Dr. Rashida, the name Dr. Rashida. So that's why I go by Dr. Rashida. And a lot of my families call me Dr. Rashida. I'm still like just a really humble person. You know, I signed DPT, so I use my credentials, but I always still, you know, introduce myself as Miss Rashida or just Rashida to the parents. But, you know, from a professional standpoint, I am a doctor of physical therapy and I do sign my notes, Dr. Rashida now. And I refer to myself as Dr. Rashida on my social media and all of that because I am a doctor of physical therapy and I just love the sound of it. And that just like when that one parent was like, "I'm going to give you a props. You're a doctor. I'm going to call you Dr. Rashida." And it kind of sucks. So that's my journey to becoming a physical therapy. Now I am still primarily in early intervention. But I do have private cases. I love the geriatric population. I had this one geriatric patient that I saw that she just loved when I would come. And we wouldn't even do like exercises like we would do exercises like I would have her do weights for her arms and leg exercises and things. But her main thing was just being able to do her laundry in her house and cook. She used to love to cook for her husband. So we did a lot of like functional things, which physical therapy ultimately helps a person get to their functional levels. And she was just so grateful. I remember we would go on walks and we would set a goal of this big tree in the middle of her block. And we would go to that tree and then we would go past the tree. And she was just so grateful for me to be able to come and help her to get more independent. I also do virtual consultations. So not necessarily being someone's PT virtually. A lot of times sometimes all it takes is just a consultation or two just to get people moving, giving them tips to how to exercise appropriately or how to incorporate movement into their daily routines. And that is a passion of mine. So while my full-time job is still working in early intervention, primarily home care, so I go to people's houses or either to daycare to work with the infants and toddlers I work with. But I love just being able to reach people on a broader spectrum, to connect virtually, because realistically, some people just don't have the means to go to the gym or don't have the means to just get out and walk in their neighborhoods. I hope you enjoyed my scenic route to becoming a PT, and hearing about a little bit about me and how I got to where I am. And I hope it's inspiring to people, because even though I, had to deal with my dad being sick early on when I was in school, and I had bad grades, and especially in the sciences, and that could have been discouraging for some, but I still kept going. And I ultimately became a physical therapist, and I'm touching people every day. I mean, I have people reach out to me all the time about, I was their child's physical therapist when they were younger, when they were babies, and now they're like teenagers, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this was my little baby that was delayed, and even like adults that I've worked with that, just continue to reach out to me and thank me for helping them to gain that independence that they were looking for. So follow me on social media, RBV Physical Development. My podcast, Instagram and YouTube is RBV, the Milestone Whisperers. Look forward to more episodes where I'll get into like developmental milestones. I'll be talking to experts and childcare owners and, just people working on developmental milestones. But I'm super excited about just life's milestones, because we all go through milestones through life. We all go through journeys to get to those milestones. And the milestone isn't what's most important. It's that journey to get to that milestone is what's most important, because we all have a story. We all have several stories to tell. And that's what's so touching about this community that I'm hoping to create, and hoping to touch people and hoping to make an impact and being encouraging to people to not stop when they hit a hurdle, to keep going, because it's going to be worth it in the end. So thanks for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.